Do you identify as an artist? The final chapters of I'm Not an Artist by Giovanni Aloi. This week I will cover Chapter 7, Outsiders and Professional Amateurs, and Chapter 8, I'm Not an Artist. The past 8 weeks of posting about the question, can art transform the world, has left me with more questions than answers. Reading I'm Not an Artist by Giovanni Aloi helped clarify some thoughts. Art in relation to capitalism is bound to fail, whereas when we align our art with nature and community, we reach for real creativity, sustainability, and sociability. Can we leave behind unethical, isolationist tendencies and find ways to create as communities? Aloi refers to the concept of art as, quote, a biased, selective, and always ideologically driven negotiation with reality. What is chosen as subject, what is left out of the frame, the mood instilled by the lighting, what occupies the foreground, even the most seemingly innocent bunch of flowers is wrapped in political, social, and ecological questions, unquote. Aloi 124 to 125. I had the goal these past 8 weeks to seek some semblance of meaning in the face of uncertainty. We are at a cultural turning point. Divide and isolate into small identity-based groups, or globalize and unify as one people. For better or worse, we are connected as a planet. It is not too late to turn back the clock on climate change, to prevent world hunger, and to reach for new horizons as a global community. Art is at the forefront of this search for meaning. Aloi explains this well in the following paragraph. Quote, contemporary art is an amplifier, an interface through which we encounter and decode the complexities and nuances of the world. It connects time and space, reconfigures past histories, and offers endless opportunities to envision new futures. Today, artists are expected to give talks, write essays, curate exhibitions, and rally communities. In many different ways, they are expected to be activists. Unquote. Aloi 125. While activism should be at the forefront of art, what we are conditioned to see as real art, the art in museums, often is the furthest removed from art as activism. This carefully curated approach to creating one unified perspective of what art can be is a misdirection. Imagine the world we could create if museums reflected the realities of our world, rather than a set of long-dead ideals. Aloi elaborates on this topic in the following paragraph. Quote, all the artworks we learn about in art history books were validated by a critic, purchased, positioned in someone's collection, and eventually gifted to a museum. That's truly how they got there. This is precisely why museum art can never equate to true freedom beyond what it represents. This art comes to life already a prisoner of mediation, compromise, privilege, and exclusivity. The homogeneity and coherence of the Western canon are founded upon this premise. In response, Asian and African art have been relegated to the ancient times chapters of the art history book, implicitly cast as retrograde, labeled primitive. Many art history texts today still fail to appropriately acknowledge the massive debt that modernism owes to African art, and those that do tend to recount visits to the Parisian Musée d'Ethnographie as inspiration rather than appropriation. Unquote. Aloi 131. It is past time for Western art to move aside and clear some space for the rest of the world. People make art across the world, not just in America and Europe, and there is no reason to prioritize the contemporary art of part of the globe, but not all of the globe. It is time to change how we define art, how we define being an artist, and how our communities interface with these definitions. Aloi goes on to say that, quote, this is why our very notion of art, how we talk about it and exchange it, needs to change from the ground up as well as the top down, along with the notion of what an artist is, of course. To begin to see a real radical change, we must also give up this idea of the inside and outside, a process that begins with the reconsideration of the outsider artist, unquote. Aloi 131. While I could dive into a whole series of essays just on the concept of outsider art, I will stick to a brief summary in the interest of time. If you are curious about this art movement, whose main commonality is a disinterest in the established systems of making art, check out the Art Story website for more information. One artist who is of interest is Judith Scott. The Art Story website includes a brief biography of her on their Art Brut page. Her sculptures are described as intricate wrappings of everyday objects in yarn. Because she had Down syndrome, no one noticed when a fever as a young child led to her becoming deaf. She was institutionalized at 7 years old and was never given the opportunity to learn sign language because no one knew she was deaf till much later in life. Her twin sister finally got her out of the institution when she was 42, and 2 years later, she was accepted into an art program for adults with disabilities. After a period of seeming uninterested in the art projects offered there, Judith saw a fiber arts demo and began making her sculptures. Her sister Joyce considered these sculptures to be one of her first ways of communicating with the world around her. On the Fiber Arts Takes Two blog, there was a fruitful discussion of whether Judith should even be considered an outsider artist. Quote, whatever viewers decide about Judith's work on an individual basis, some people in the art world have firmly placed her work in the category of outsider art. Outsider art is roughly defined as art that is outside the official culture. Sometimes it is described as the only way that people with mental illness or other disabilities can communicate. Other times it is defined as art made without intentionality, art that has a naive quality, or art that is produced by people without any art training. Lists of famous outsider artists routinely include Judith Scott. Joyce Scott also weighed in on this question. She noted that while her sister was once regarded as an outsider artist, today that is no longer the case. Instead, she is viewed as a brilliant and original contemporary artist whose works have been acquired by major museums around the world, unquote. Labeling an artist as an outsider is not always a helpful distinction to make, as this category is loose to begin with and rife with bias and discrimination. Rather than outsider art versus insider art, maybe it would be better to just look at art with open eyes and a critical lens on how it got to be placed in a museum instead of other art pieces. Moving into the final section of this book, Chapter 8 wraps up I'm Not an Artist, with Aloi stating some great takeaways on creativity. Quote, creativity is an endless and wholly generative process of mitosis. It knows no categories or hierarchies. It is the essence of the living that encompasses the cosmos. Stars, animals, plants, humans, fungi, bacteria, viruses, we're all made of the same matter that constantly reconfigures and reinvents itself. This planet is a creative conglomerate where everything is intimately interconnected. Constant transformation is the only truth. Creativity is a process of becoming, a repurposing, and weaving. Unquote. Aloi 154. While the meaning I have sought these past 8 weeks has been elusive even to me at times, I think the line, constant transformation is the only truth, sums things up nicely. The meaning will shift as the information we encounter unfolds, and that is just part of life. It is a beautiful process to watch as an idea emerges from its shell, opens itself up to reality, and is transformed once it is seen to completion. Creativity is powerful, and I sincerely believe every person is able to harness this force to create positive change in our world. Part of being creative is being allowed to make mistakes. It is important we give one another grace and allow for correcting these missteps. Nature is not perfect. There are mud puddles, death and decay, and all sorts of misformed anomalies. This is reflected in our humanity. It is only natural that as creatures of the earth, we are bound to make mistakes. What is important is the meaning that arises from these errors, and the ways we can handle ourselves when accidents happen. So let us strive to leave our egos at the door and enter an era of unknown growth, unknown creativity, and unknowable outcomes. The systems humans created over several hundred years are not serving our collective best interests, so let us find creative solutions in their place. Aloi begins wrapping up his book by saying, quote, "Today, creativity, not art in the sense it was constructed in the West, has the power to change the world. Creativity, not art, bears the potential to be truly free from the constructions of social class, race, and gender. Conceiving the art world as a vibrant and lively ecosystemic entity in which multiple organisms engage in symbiotic or coexisting relationships over time can help us envision more sustainable, creative realities." Unquote. Aloi 155. One final question before I finish this series of posts. Do you identify as an artist? Tell me about why you do or why you don't in the comments. Thanks for following along as I search for meaning and purpose within creative practices.